Welcome to the Zweig Podcast, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting advice and guidance in your ear. Zweig Group's team of experts have spent more than 3 decades elevating the industry by helping AEP and environmental consulting firms thrive. And these podcasts deliver invaluable management, industry, client, marketing, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweig Podcasts, elevating the design industry one episode at a time.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of the Zweig Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited to be with you today. I'm actually sitting with a very good friend of mine in a, well, let's just say it's almost like a closet, but it's not quite a closet today. We are in the here in Fayetteville. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Northwest Arkansas, where Zweig Group is actually headquartered, we are at the Fayetteville Public Library. It's actually an award-winning library. For those of you that are in the design space, you'll appreciate that this library has won many awards. It was actually, I think, voted in 2012 like the number one library in the country.
That's right. And
it just recently had an expansion of 49, almost 50, let's just round up, a $50 million expansion that was done over the past year and a half. And we're sitting in a new space as part of the innovation lab here. And part of that innovation lab is a podcast booth because podcasting has grown. And so I would love to say or take credit for the fact that the Zweig podcast was ahead of its time. But I think people are finally catching on to this whole notion of voice and of storytelling and of extending your brand both externally and internally. And so Zweig Group has been at the forefront of that, as they have in so many different ways. But without further ado, that's a long, drawn-out way for me to introduce my next guest, Chad Clinehens, who is the chief honcho at Zweig Group, the head guy and a good friend of mine, and somebody that when I originally came back to Zweig Group to work with Mark Zweig, he was an individual that I was so fortunate enough to work with and learn from. And so without further ado, Chad, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic.
That's good. It's good. It's good to have you. It's good to see you. We haven't seen each other in the last year and a half, but a handful of times. We've had coffee, socially distanced. And so this is kind of cool to be able to come back and sit down and connect with you. So
that's right. And it was a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, when we saw each other for the first time after the pandemic started
right.
for this podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was a very different situation then.
It was definitely a different situation. And I don't know about you, but I'm certainly thankful for, how far we've come, but we still have a ways to go.
Certainly.
And it's just kind of the way that it is. But
yeah.
I really want to talk today about Elevate because of the pandemic, Zweig Group had to figure out a different way to deliver what has, honestly been one of the top industry programs. And originally it was called Hot Firm, and now it's called ElevateAEC because we're trying to elevate the whole industry, right? As a rising tide lifts all ships. It's one of your favorite quotes.
Absolutely.
But I mean, the idea here is that the pandemic has actually caused everybody to do things differently. And Zweig Group is as part of that, you've had to deal with that. And one thing that you're doing differently this year is that, like last year, except for the fact that there will be a live event, you're doing the ElevateAEC virtual program one more time.
That's right.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of what went into that decision-making process, and also just some of the amazing feedback that you received from last year's event, which from the people that I talked to, they were blown away by the content, by the number of people that spoke at the event virtually, and by how much people got out of that. What was a very difficult time for a lot of people, how much great education and information and encouragement was received from the virtual event last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to say it was accidental success. We were very intentional about the event last year, but hey, we'd never done a virtual event like that. And we had talked for years about providing Elevate, the conference, in-person conference experience, and the amazing content that is shared on that platform virtually, and just hadn't done it. Well, leave it up to a pandemic to force you into doing new things. And it was about a year ago where the two of us met and talked about the future of the conference. And I can't remember, I think at that time we were still debating in person versus virtual, but we ended up doing a virtual experience. And I think one of the things that really set it apart is that it was free.
Yeah.
And if you go back 3 years ago to Dallas, Texas, where we unveiled our Elevate the Industry vision, it's more than just a business vision or slogan. It really is more of a calling. And as part of that, it was about sharing as much insight, thought leadership that we can in order to help firms perform better. Now, we've got to make a living at it, of course. But last year, we did this event over 8 weeks. And at the time, it seemed like a brilliant strategy. And I think it was. I think it spread out the learning over a time period that allowed people to consume it versus having to commit 2 days to being on Zoom. And at that point in the year, I think everybody recognized that spending a day or 2 days on Zoom, like a lot of other conferences were doing, seemed tiresome. And so we spread it out over 8 weeks. And I will tell you that the attendees loved it. The Zweig Group staff, we were relieved to have it done. It was a marathon that I think was more exhausting than we realized, but we did accomplish what we set out to do.
Yeah.
And that was share a lot of inspiring and very important information with a very large audience.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the numbers, but I know I talked to a ton of people that, they may not have attended everything, but they attended something. And there was always a takeaway. Everybody that I talked to had a takeaway. Oh, I listened to Gabrielle Bullock, or I heard this person, or I heard that person speak. And, you almost had a chance to bring so many different people to the table that you wouldn't normally be able to do in a normal conference.
That's right.
For
both speakers and attendees, the ease of access was, I don't want to say it was an aha moment, but it's like, my gosh, why haven't we always been doing this?
Yeah.
But we haven't been doing it like that because traditionally our focused resources have been on in-person. And there's something amazing about gathering in person and networking and seeing people that you haven't seen in the past year. But there's the other side of it, and that is the side of this conference that's so valuable, and that is the information, the thought leadership, the insights that are shared that a larger audience gets a benefit from. So this year, we're doing both.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so this year, the virtual event will be from September 13th through October 7th. So not quite 2 months, but about almost basically a month. You're going to be doing that. Yeah.
That's right.
And that's going to be kind of a nice lead up to the in-person event, which is going to take place from November 3rd through the 5th in Denver, Colorado. And that's the ElevateAEC conference. So, I mean, we're not that I don't know that we are at the end of this pandemic. I really don't know at the time of recording this. It's in August. It's hot, but there's still a lot of challenges that we're dealing with. But you guys are pretty excited about the prospect of being able to safely come together in November at an outstanding venue in Denver to do this event.
That's right. And not knowing what, November looks like at this point, I can safely say that the event that we have planned out was planned back at the height of the pandemic. And so the spacing, the spaces, the plan for where people are and how we move them around was based on all of those restrictions that most have been lifted since then. And so we have capacity for a large crowd, or we have capacity for a socially distanced crowd. And so we've got capacity for anybody who wants to sign up, or we still have available capacity at the event. And I think that over the next couple of months, we will have a good conference come together, and we're ready.
Yeah.
We're beyond ready, actually.
Right.
We're really ready.
No, that's good. So just flipping the script back to the virtual conference, will there be anything different this year that wasn't experienced last year?
On the virtual side, it's going to be similar. We're going to have some more of Zweig Group's, our seminars and our thought leadership that we deliver through our paid content. We're actually going to have that as part of this experience for free.
Wow.
Last year, it was part of the premium, so you had to pay for that. And so the beautiful thing about this year's virtual conference is that you will be able to attend and get everything for free that everybody else is getting.
Yeah.
And you can get 30 hours of professional development along the way.
And you can't beat that, and I would love to ask you, because I know that you've been on the road a little bit since travel has kind of loosened up some, and you've talked to so many different leaders of so many different firms. And does it seem like to you that everybody has, especially during this period of the pandemic, has kind of doubled down on personal and professional development? Yes.
I think early on it was, how do we transfer knowledge, especially to the younger folks that whether they're in their engineer internship and part of that 4-year residency, if you will, or really just what you need along the way. I think we all figured out that, hey, virtual learning is a great, easy way to get bite-sized learning throughout the week or month. And so that's why when we packaged all of what was all in person, everything, Principals Academy, Elevating Do Your Sellers, all of that was in person. When we packaged that up virtually, I was pleasantly surprised by how well it was received.
Yeah.
Because at that time, I figured it's like, well, this is what we have to do.
Yeah.
But people gave us great feedback, really liked it. And so we'll continue to do our programs virtually, probably forever. And we'll bring those programs back, as we are starting with Elevate, in person for those who want to travel and want to be in person with others. So again, something for everyone is going to be a theme going forward forever.
Yeah. And I like that. And certainly I can concur with that, because I still do a lot of consulting with Zweig Group. I still do some training, and I did a number of when companies can hire Zweig Group to come in and do personalized training, so they can take like the leadership training or the Principals Academy and cater it to the specific needs of that company. And so several organizations during the pandemic, which was really great, I had the opportunity to work along with Phil Kyle and other advisors at Zweig Group to be able to do trainings like that virtually, and they were really successful. I mean, like hundreds of people on these calls. It would be amazing. And you'd have people in California and other parts of the country, especially for those firms that have multiple office locations among multiple time zones. And I was always blown away at how we were able to deliver the kind of product that, a client wants or needs, especially in this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I thought that was exciting. So talk a little bit. I know the ElevateHer Symposium, that's going to also take place during the virtual. Is that correct?
That's correct. Very similar to last year, the ElevateHer Symposium and the ElevateAEC Conference virtual experiences all together throughout this 4 weeks. And the cohorts, the ElevateHer cohorts, class of 2021, will be presenting their thesis, and I'm very, very excited about what they have been working on.
I'm excited too. And for the uninitiated that are listening to this, and maybe you guys have been in a cave somewhere and didn't know about ElevateHer, would you just tell us a little bit about ElevateHer? And again, the genesis behind it, because I think it's genius. It was something that this industry needed years ago, but it really didn't have a language for it. Now we do. And it's just, it's kind of taken on a life of its own.
Well, ElevateHer was a great program, partially inspired by our Elevate the Industry vision. And really what it is a gathering of the best minds to solve the industry's biggest challenge, and that's recruiting and retention. And I would even say it's more than a challenge, it's a crisis.
Yeah.
And it's beyond gender diversity, it's racial, it spans everything. It's really about how do we draw and retain talent to this industry.
Sure.
Because, I think the AEC industry, it's like one of the best kept secrets. It really is. And I think there's a lot of great programs and STEM programs and other efforts, that are today that didn't exist back when I was in school. And that's great. But really what I would say ElevateHer does is it brings people together to really bring tangible solutions that firms can implement. Like, this is something I can do. I do these things and it's implemented. It's and not we talk a lot about it, but how do we actually solve it? And it has to be constructed and designed by those who are working in the firms and understand the challenges. And I think that's one of the neat things about ElevateHer is it's got a wide cross section, very diverse talent that comes from all levels of the firm, top to bottom, left to right, that really come together and say, what do we need to do to solve this? What are the barriers we need to break down? And it goes beyond the, I would say, traditional approach.
Yeah. And I like the fact, I mean, I've talked to some people that have been through the cohort and they rave about their experience, not just the experience with Zweig Group and how you guys pulled this together, but just the experience with everybody that was a part of it, all of the other members of the cohort and the lifelong relationships that are developed and built just through this program. Is this something that you think you're going to, I mean, because you only do it once a year. Do you think you have the capacity to expand it beyond that? Is there a market for that?
I think there is incredible potential for this program. We see it absolutely expanding and growing and having new events that help promote and advance this cause. And, it was inspired by our managing principal, Jamie Claire Kaiser, in a letter she wrote that was really an experience. And that's what this is about. It's about changing the experience of AEC. And I think it's a powerful movement that is just getting started.
Yeah. We're just at the tip of the iceberg, folks. I didn't mean to put you on the spot about, committing to more cohorts than one per year, because I know it's a lot of work to put that on, but
it is.
I think that this industry, like you said, one of the biggest challenges that the design industry faces is recruitment and retention. And how do you recruit some of the best people out there? You have to be really intentional about it. That's like one of my favorite words, especially in this space. You have to be intentional about looking for the kind of people that you want to bring on that become a reflection of your organization. And you can't do that if you don't have a good pool of potential candidates to choose from.
That's right. And employee experience is not a buzzword that's being thrown around, or EX, as some people talk about it. It is really, that is what we've got to promote and enhance. And it's a critical part of this. And the ElevateHer cohorts are working towards really enhancing and improving our ability to recruit in this industry. And because we're competing with other industries that previous decades and generations were not competing with.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was interviewing a client that I personally work with that actually is a client of Zweig's as well, but a really great story. And I tell this story all the time now, is that I was interviewing this guy that had recently joined the firm, and his decision was between this AEC firm, very successful firm, and Amazon. Mm-hmm. And he told the most interesting story about why he chose to go with this firm. This firm's an ESOP. They're a very successful design firm. They actually have a lot of benefits. And he just said it felt more like family. And, a lot of times we say, well, he's crazy. He turned down Jeff Bezos and all that. And that's a great opportunity for some people, but not everybody, right? And I think every design firm needs to elevate their thinking about what makes them special. And this firm did that, and they sold this gentleman on it. And he was, I guess he's been at the firm at the time that I interviewed him, about 6 or 7 months. Couldn't be happier, has a high quality of life with his family, and has a high quality of job satisfaction in the work that he's doing and the difference that he's making with that organization. So it's not always about, sometimes, we think, we can't compete with the Googles of the world or the Amazons of the world when you're looking at design professionals, but I do believe you can.
Not only that, this work that we do in AEC is so meaningful. I mean, we're the designers of the world, and the end product is so incredible. And really, it's one of those things where this industry, we've been modest for long enough. We've been humble. It's time that we, really share with the world what we do. And we've got to get more competitive. I mean, because the story you just shared, that's happening more and more every day. And so we've got to get competitive. We've got to figure out how to solve some of the things that have held us back. And we've traditionally lagged in diversity, and we've lagged in workplace flexibility. And, 2 of those things were really highlighted by the pandemic. And I think that just because, at least some of us being able to take our mask off and things feel like they're going back to normal, doesn't mean that we need to go all the way back. We need to make sure that we charge on, and especially the things that were started, some of the initiatives, some of the things that cause change in our firms, that we don't just revert back. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think it is an iterative process, and you constantly, it's like Kaizen approach of consistent improvement, right? You don't want to take 3 steps back to go 1 step forward. You want to continue just 1 step at a time,
But the more you do that, the more you will advance.
Absolutely.
So tell me, Chad, because, again, like I said earlier, I alluded to the fact that you are back out on the road meeting with clients. I'd just be curious to know, and I'm sure some of our listeners are, what are you seeing out there when you're interacting with firms now in terms of how they feel about things, about the economy, about their general health, and also about the future? What are they thinking about with regard to the future? I would just be curious to know what your thoughts are and what you've gleaned from some of those interactions.
Well, I think a lot of firms are saying, what do we do with these resources? Because not everybody fared well in the pandemic, obviously, even in this industry, and it depended on what client types you were focused on. But a lot of firms did well. And, we are typically resilient in down times. And I think with all of the resources that we've got and even the knowledge, it's how do we deploy those going forward and how do we not revert back? I think there's certainly some concerns about like employee mental health. And,
Sure.
That's top of mind, and burnout. And, bringing people back in, we believe that we're a little bit more like have the ability to monitor that. But the reality is that I think the pandemic really changed that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when we talk about employee experience and taking care of our people, I think we've really got to figure out, how do we going forward really address that and design our workplace appropriately. And so there's a lot of debate about what does the return to work look like. Some firms have been working in the office most of the pandemic. Some are just now coming back. Some are probably rethinking, based on even just the data over the last couple of weeks. But I think all of that we've got to figure out how do we manage and inspire our workforce regardless of where they are, and what the environmental factors are out there, because we've been dealing with some pretty severe environmental factors over the last year.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, and again, from a current event standpoint, when you look at somebody like a Simone Biles, who's at the top of her game, deciding to, sit down because mentally she's just not there, that speaks volumes. And granted, we all have Simone Biles on our team at different design firms.
That's right.
And she, in that essence, she represents those talented individuals that are part of your organization that you want to take care of. Of course, you want to take care of everybody, but you want to take care of those individuals and make sure that they are in the right frame of mind and the right place to serve the needs of your clients at the highest level possible.
Right. Absolutely. The timing of this podcast will time well with an article that I'm going to be putting out in TZL in the next couple of weeks. And I've been working on different titles, but I could sum it up by employee sentiment soars as really the conclusion from our Best Firms to Work For survey, which is the largest employee experience survey in the industry by far. I mean, we get over 2 million data points just out of this survey alone. You get 13,000 plus voices from AEC firms, and it's pretty amazing. And across the board, and there's a lot of items that people register their opinions and feelings on. It's over 110. Only 3 went down this year. The rest of them all went up across the board. The 3 were my effectiveness working from home, my team's effectiveness working from home, and my firm takes the time to celebrate achievements. And, I think those things, we've got to look at that and say, okay, how do we, the answer isn't, well, then let's get everybody back in the office.
Right.
It's how do we solve those problems with not just a simple-minded, approach, and really think through what do we need to do as a workplace to enhance employee experience and performance and deal with underperformers and those that are kind of contrary to the culture and are creating issues.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's, you've been around this industry for a while. I've been around in this industry since '97, and you're absolutely right. We are the last people we being those of us that have worked in the design industry space, have been the last to kind of herald our successes. We just kind of put our head down and go on to the next thing. And I think what we're learning now is that, okay, it's okay to take a minute to smell the roses, to acknowledge achievement, and, attaboy, attagirl, let's keep it going. There's nothing wrong with that. And too often, and I know you guys, when you do strategic planning, when you do these assessments and surveys of individualized companies, just like with what you do with Best Firm to Work For, you hear firsthand from employees that say, hey, we never celebrate a victory. And, there's something to be said for that. I mean, it's high time that we start doing that with more regularity in this space.
That's why it's one of the pillars of our Elevate the Industry vision. Celebrates one of the 5 pillars, and it is so important.
Yeah, celebrate, educate. I mean, there's so many different aspects of the whole Elevate idea and mantra that, everybody needs to grab onto. So, well, I want to, before we close out, I certainly wanted to ask you what is next for Zweig Group, because it just, every time I turn around, it seems to be something new. Now, I don't know if it's because I've been gone from the company as a full-time employee since 2019, and you guys have just kind of upended everything and have really reorganized. And I mean, you've got people working in different cities than you've ever had before. You've got a growing Dallas office, and of course, you've got the headquarters here in Fayetteville. But what's next for Zweig Group? What are you bullish about?
We are bullish on everything. Well, as you know, Zweig Group does a lot, but for us, and it's the mission to be and I emphasize leaders of thought leadership in the AEC industry, and really that people can come to us for anything. How can they, as individuals, elevate their performance, and then how, as firms, how can they elevate their performance? We've got some neat things that we are going to be announcing, including, of course, most recently, our Zweig Group Risk Solutions is really some neat solutions for larger firms. And so when I say there's something for everyone, that's kind of a theme right now.
Yeah.
And so we're working on a number of new things, as you know, all the time. Bigger and more, I would say, offers in training and development.
Sure.
And that is something, because that is still the number one benefit ranked by AEC staff. And so we are really looking to bring some new ideas and approaches to the industry. And really just all of the areas of advisory that we have traditionally worked in are growing and evolving. And it's an exciting time. The team is growing, and we're just right now, it is. I think the economists call it demand surge.
Right.
I can say we're feeling that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, this is. I mean, it's been what is it? It's been 2.5+ years since you kind of took the helm of the ship. How has it felt for you, kind of putting your thumbprint on the DNA of this organization?
Well, I'll tell you. And
I know you're not alone. I mean, there are other people behind. I mean, you've got an amazing team, all of which I highly love and respect. But I mean, just as the leader, you still are the guy that, is the one that's, riding the ship and taking it in the direction you want to go. But what's it felt like for you?
Well, I will say that the Elevate the Industry vision is something that for me is incredibly inspiring. It captures my entire career, really, from the very beginning of what I wanted to set out to do. And I've got an amazing team that is 100% bought in on that. And it's evidenced by many of the things that we've talked about today. And it's just the beginning, really, and here we are in 2021. We could almost say, what was 2020? Is it a year that you just discount?
Right.
But you don't. You don't. I mean, it kind of forced this quantum evolution in everybody, including our firm. And we're in a great spot. And we've got a great team. And that's what it's all about. And we're working on things inside our company, the same things we're telling our client firms to work on too. Practice what you preach.
Absolutely.
It's so critical.
No, Mark, that's all that Mark Zweig has ever talked about. And I mean, you're taking it to a whole nother level. So man, I really want to commend you for that. And I'm glad that we're friends. And I certainly am watching with eager expectation for the next iteration of Zweig Group and what you guys continue to do. So I'll be there participating and cheering this fall with the virtual ElevateAEC event. And hopefully I'll even be in Colorado, and we'll see what happens. But regardless, thank you so much for taking a moment out of your busy schedule to come on the Zweig podcast and kind of cast the vision for where we are and where you want to go. So I appreciate that.
Always great to be here. Thank you, Randy.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's another episode of the Zweig podcast. I want to remind you again about the ElevateAEC free virtual expo experience, if you will, coming up September 13th through October 7th. You can go to zweiggroup.com, and there's a link right there for you to sign up for this event. You can also, if you want to come in person, which I would highly recommend if you're able to come to the ElevateAEC conference from November 3rd through the 5th in Denver, Colorado. It's going to be an outstanding event. It will be done right. If there's one thing I know about Chad Clinehens, this man knows how to throw an event. I would say a party, but I would just say an event is a much better choice of words. But I think you'll enjoy it. So I really want to encourage you to just be a part of what Zweig Group is doing in this industry to elevate all of us, one program at a time. So to learn more about one of the oldest newsletters in the design industry, please visit thezweigletter.com. You can read articles online, listen to this podcast, sign up for a free subscription to the newsletter, and have it delivered right into your email inbox every Monday morning. Sign up today. For more info about Zweig Group's advisory services that Chad mentioned today or Zweig Group publications, visit zweiggroup.com. Again, you can subscribe to the Zweig Letter podcast wherever you listen to it, and please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you soon. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zweig Letter podcast. We hope that you can be part of elevating the industry and that you can apply our advice and information to your daily professional life. For a free digital subscription to the Zweig Letter, please visit thezweigletter.com/subscribe to gain more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about leadership, finance, HR, and marketing your firm. Subscribe today.